If you don't have a long-term perspective while going international, don't do it. It took us many decades to achieve the global leadership of our industry. If you don't have the support of the board for this long-term commitment, maybe just go for smaller things.
The bigger a company gets, the further its leaders get from the front line, from the customer. It's just what scale does. Growth separates leaders from the folks that make and sell their products, from the folks that buy their products, from the players on the field, from the truth. Daniel Servitje has spent 27 years fighting this. His enemy's not growth. We'd all want his track record. It's distance. I'm Jimmy Allen, and this is Founders Mentality, the CEO Sessions. Daniel is the executive chairman of Grupo Bimbo, the world's largest baking company. 80 years old, 39 countries, 9 times the size it was when he became CEO. And he was on a bread truck yesterday. This conversation is about how you fight distance at scale, across decades, across cultures, how you move fast when it matters and stay patient when it counts, and how you set the tone of a business, not from the boardroom, but from the bakery floor.
I went on a hot summer in southern Spain to visit one of our bakeries. We had acquired a company like 18 months ago from a lady that was an entrepreneur that developed a business on gluten-free. And Maria, when I saw her, she had fire in her eyes. She basically was telling me all the nice things about the company, all the energy that she had felt in the company, and the good intentions and the human quality of our leaders. But she also basically said, I don't want to be prudent. I want to tell you how things are. She mentioned all the frustration with our processes, with our CapEx process, with the long meetings and the number of people getting involved in making decisions. I ended up in the tour filming her with my phone and asking her questions about how she developed the products, the connection that she had with the heavy consumers that she was working with on those developments. And it was very inspiring to see someone so refreshing in the company.
Just internally, do you take these voices of the founders and use them yourself to change behaviors of your team?
Much so. We have some big events in the company. And the biggest of all occurs in the fall of every year. And we bring people from the 39 countries in which we have presence, from all areas, but more importantly, from the marketing and sales areas and the top management team. And a year ago, I was hearing all those things from different entrepreneurs on what they were doing, or our own people telling me how we were not moving as fast as we used to or would need to. So I ended up bringing all those voices and asking our teams to revisit our way of going, because we have been growing. And as you grow, you get more complex, you get more focused on meeting budgets, on reviewing things in detail, on how you're going to assess risks. But at the end of the day, you slow down the company. You miss opportunities. You see competitors gaining ground on many fronts. And I said, it's on us. It's on the company to see things with a new light and question yourselves.
And in this trade fair, what were the 2 things people took away of how do you keep the entrepreneurial spirit in a large, successful company? What were the actions everybody walked away with?
I would say that they were surprised that I was so firm in my understanding that this was a breaking point in the company. At the end of the day, I had been the CEO of the company for 27 years. I had been able to grow the company 9 times from where I received it. I was no longer the CEO, I was the executive chair, but I had a little bit more space to see how things were going. And that was like, yes, let's do it. You're right, because we're all seeing the same thing, but we were not comfortable in moving ahead and breaking the glass to start anew on changing processes, on expedite, on many things that were basically the norm at that time, no? And it's taking time. Big corporations don't move swiftly one day from the other, but I see that the pace is moving now in the right direction.
It's an amazing theme that I think there's a myth that as you become CEO and become huge and big and everybody views you, that CEOs walk around with big thoughts, thinking big things. And yet every time I talk to you, you're always talking about the little things, the specific things. Why do you do that?
I do strategy in the field. I don't do strategy in the boardrooms. When you get in discussions and you just talk about generalities, you don't sense where are the issues. But when you get deep inside what makes things work in the bakeries or in the sales centers or in the marketplace, then you understand what works and what not. And it's very specific. So I usually try to get deep into the small things so that then from there you get the big ideas. And it's the same as with Maria. Maria, she developed the products with a very small set of heavy users. And she understood their needs very closely. And from there, she had a lot of confidence on the things that worked for their products to be superior to others.
Think about what it takes for that conference moment to happen. First, how many leaders would do that? Stand up in front of 39 countries and hold the mirror up? And not to their predecessor, to themselves, to the company they built. And second, how many leaders understand the huge power of small things? Letting Maria speak her truth. That only works in a culture where people aren't afraid to tell the truth. That only works in a culture that listens first to the voice of the front line, the voice of the customer. And that's the culture Daniel has been building. Not from the top down, from the field up, from small things. When he became CEO, Bimbo was basically a Mexican company. That's it. But winning on home turf is one thing. Playing internationally is a different game entirely.
What I always say is, if you want to go international, you have to make sure that you have a strong foot in your own market. If it's a weak foundation, international won't solve anything. It will only get you into more problems. But that was not our case. The business was strong in Mexico, and we decided that we could have an international opportunity. But the biggest lesson of all is that if you don't have a long-term perspective while going international, don't do it. Because it took us many decades to achieve the global leadership of our industry. If you don't have the support of the board for this long-term commitment, maybe just go for smaller things.
Often, I think people forget how long it takes to develop your first position. Your Mexico position took years to develop, and then you want to go into the US or go to another market and expect success overnight. And it takes just as long to develop that second market as your first and the third. But most people don't have the boards with the patience to be able to let it happen. And I think that's one of the magical things you guys have is public company long-term patience.
That to me was the most important differentiation between us and many other players. The long-term perspective and the consistency of the board to continue to invest even if there were no results or even where there were bad results for that specific country. And I would say that the third one, which is probably less common, it's a very deep understanding on the original founders of the company that the business priority was first and the shareholders came second. In terms of the uses of the profits, the reinvestment in acquisitions, CapEx, has always been the first priority in the company, and the percentage of the dividend is much smaller than what goes back into the business. So that allows us basically to compound our growth and to sustain the competitive issues that we have in a different market.
As you went international, the classic case, and I can imagine this especially for the kind of culture you had, is how much do we export our culture and impose it on each of our acquisitions, each of our markets, and how much do we allow our culture to change based on the new company? And I'd just love to hear what your experience, because it's such a classic issue for founders.
This is a great question, Jimmy, and one that we suffer through the times, especially when we moved from Mexico to the US. That was like a culture clash. I would say that we have a very special philosophy. We aim to be a sustainable, meaning a long-term surviving company, highly productive, and fully humane. So in a sense, the highly productive is very much into what most large companies understand, but a fully humane was like, what are you talking about? And we had a very good atmosphere in our company in Mexico. And when we tried to translate that into the different cultures, it worked well, mostly in Latin America. In the US, we had trouble at the beginning. But then we also have had the opportunity to understand what the companies that we were acquiring, what were their values. And we have in the past been incorporating the most important components like safety that were not strong, or diversity that also have been very important in the past year. So now we have a very well accepted global culture. And when we acquired companies, for example, we acquired a couple of companies in Eastern Europe, in Romania and Serbia. And I was truly impressed by how easy the culture was accepted and cherished by our associates there. So as time has passed, this culture has and our values have been embraced because are now very much global values. We have become a much more open company than what we were before.
You mentioned that there was a fourth generation member going to a boot camp. Do you have boot camps? Do you have opportunities where people really do get together to get a complete immersion in your culture and how you operate?
We have like 5 different courses, a 2-day seminar for every leader in the company. She might be a president of a country or a sanitation supervisor in a bakery. The same seminar applies. There might be some chats that are global, like, for example, me giving a chat of half an hour or an hour, or the CEO. But the main thing is that the seminar is given by the leaders of the company. Because what we want is that the culture gets seen in real time. If the leaders speak about something, is not that they're just saying this thing printed in the wall. It's that the leaders act and lead with the integrity, with the values of the company, because the culture is what the leader does with their teams, not what is written. It's what you see in the day-to-day actions with your leader.
Culture isn't what's in the handbook or on the walls. It's what everybody does every day when folks aren't watching. It's where the leader is. It's what happens with distance as you grow. The strongest cultures tend to be the most hostile to external influence. If strong cultures acquire a new company, they demand that that company changes. Yet Bimbo's different. It's a strong culture that is reshaped through international expansion. Each acquisition brought something back: safety from the US, openness from Eastern Europe. And it makes sense. If you lead from the field, then the field shapes everything. New field, new changes. But hold on, we've seen this movie. Growth creates complexity. Each new market, each new acquisition comes with its systems, its processes, its ways of working. And all that complexity brings energy vampires, and those vampires, well, they fly around sucking the life out of entrepreneurs. Eventually, the Marias stop speaking their truth and start leaving. The question is this: how do you keep the entrepreneurial instinct alive while expanding across dozens of new markets and growing 900%? A company that keeps its entrepreneurship is willing to fail, willing to make mistakes, willing to take a risk. Oftentimes, the frustration I hear of very senior founders is they have more risk-taking appetite than a lot of their people. And I just love to hear, how do you, A, is that a problem you're seeing?
Yes.
And B, if so, how do you try to keep the culture of risk-taking going as you go forward?
Yes, definitely. As we grew, not in my time, but in my uncle, my father's time, we moved from, I would say, a very lax culture in budgeting And in my case, coming from Stanford, I became more attuned to all the professional manners in which big companies had to be run. So we ended up developing, as many other companies, a more efficient budgeting process, a more efficient planning process in the company. But as we did it, we basically probably moved into the wrong side of the equation in trying to be very specific on budgets and on trying to put a lot of carrots in front of achieving those budgets and on being very stringent on the processes for authorizing capex or whatever. And by doing that, you basically stalled the speed in which you move to tackle the opportunities. The company has been forever geared towards growth. But when you put all these things together in place, you get people leading with that intent in their mind. No, we're going to get to meet the budget, or we're going to check all the boxes to be okay with the processes. But then you're not seeing what's happening in the real life because you're more concerned about all this internal stuff. And then you as a leader, as a founder or founder's mentality, inspiration, even if you didn't found it, you have to break the processes and say, enough is enough. We have to change this because we're not seeing what's happening in the real life because we're much focused on what is in it for us or what is needed for basically achieving the status quo of the official rules. So yes, the founders or the CEOs have to be the ones who basically allow people to move outside of those boundaries. You cannot go to the other extreme, but you have to always ask the leaders to check if they're in the right place or not.
It's such an amazing case study. I mean, so when we talk about it, every great founding team, and you were right there from the beginning.
Our company is 80 years old.
Yeah, okay. So
I have been from the middle of it.
For those of you that can't see Daniel, he's definitely not 96, which would be required to be there from the very beginning. You were there in the second generation of it. What happens is the original team, when the company was small, did two different things. One is they did run the business and they put in some basic routines. Otherwise, trucks can't deliver bread on time. But they mostly kept building new things, new solutions. So the idea that we could both run the business and build new businesses was natural. But as you said, systems get a little bit lax. So then you begin to bring in systems. Well, where do systems come from? You said it perfectly. Stanford Business School, Harvard Business School. Those systems are built for the delivery side, for the run the business. So they get put in place and then they lock the company into the existing business and big opportunities go by because those systems treat new businesses almost like a hobby. Come on, hit your budget, do your things, but that new stuff is going to distract you. And so then what you have to do is, okay, I've got to keep the systems to run the business and now add the systems to change the business. How do I bring back a sense of entrepreneurship? Because you don't want to break the systems that make sure that the trucks arrive on time with hot bread. What do you do to now bring back the systems of business building, the risk-taking?
I would say that the best way we have found, I would say it's a very well-defined, systematic form of one with the same team running the business is to ask them to have what we call a full potential initiative in the business. We learned this from when we had to do a big turnaround in one of our business in Brazil. We were bleeding. We were not able to basically to perform in any matter. So we brought a team. We got help from the outside. And the same team that was running the business came with ideas. We developed a very strong program on how to transform the company while running it. And now each business has this dual responsibility to present the results on their regular quarterly numbers and also to have a team dedicated on exploiting the opportunities for having a full potential business that responds to their issues, their needs.
Okay, and I imagine a lot of what you feel your job as a leader is to give those full potential opportunities the same voice because you're the voice of patient capital.
Definitely.
I'm in it for the long run, where oftentimes the local guys feel all the pressure of impatient capital. So do you have to kind of go in and say, guys, we need to take our time on this one?
No, definitely. And it's a constant discussion between the teams, more so on the CapEx front, because when you invest in CapEx especially for growth, you're not necessarily going to feel the line in the next year or so, but you have to make the decisions because otherwise you open the space for other players to take that capacity. In my role today, that's where I play a little bit more, say, well, you probably don't want to invest because you think it's not going to be a high return project, but what are the consequences if you don't do it? No, and I'm constantly discussing with our CEO about these issues. But you have to get into these discussions. Otherwise, you miss the long-term success for the short-term benefit.
You know, I often talk that one of the roles of founders' mentality is to speed things up and to try to bring a sense of urgency. But you're actually saying sometimes the role of founders' mentality is to almost slow things down and say, guys, don't feel the pressure of the quarterly return. Let's really go after this because what's the consequences of not doing it? And it's the future of our business.
If you ask people about me, they complain that I am always pushing them to act fast. But I would say that we're a company that is more patient with capital than what I see in other places, because we understand that things will take their time. And in the long haul, it's going to be okay. You're making the right decisions for the long haul, which is you need to survive in the short term, but you need to make sure that the direction of the company is the right one for the long haul.
There's a paradox at the heart of scaling any business. You need systems to run the business reliably, efficiently, every day. Trucks have to arrive on time. Bread has to be fresh. And this demands playbooks and flawless execution. But you also need systems to change the business, new products, new markets, new ways of competing. There's no playbook. You need to test and learn your way to new solutions, trial and error. Building new businesses takes entrepreneurship, not flawless execution of known routines. In fact, the first set of systems fights the second. And most companies, as they grow, well, they rely more and more on the playbooks and lose the art of business building. Daniel's answer? Do both. Same team, dual responsibility. Run the business and change it simultaneously. But there's something underneath even that, which I think is the real insight from this conversation. Speed can be a competitive weapon, but so too can patience. And Daniel knows when and where to do both. In the market, he pushes for speed, faster reactions, faster learning, faster decisions. But when it comes to capital, expansion, long-term bets, he slows down. Not because he lacks urgency, because he thinks in decades. Fast where it matters, patient where it counts. Daniel has toggled between these two time horizons for 3 decades now. Daniel, I was just last weekend in Madrid at the IESA School of Founders. So IESA is the leading Spanish business school. And we were talking about this issue and the dilemma that founders face, where you have probably given that talk 10,000 times, your half hour of what it means to be a leader at Bimbo. And yet, if you're a successful, fast-growing company, 50% of your people may have never heard it once. And you need to constantly be saying with the same energy as the first time you did it, what it means to be part of the company. Where the hell does your energy come from to do that?
Yesterday, the team I was touring the market with, we tried to bring people from different areas. And there was the head of one of our bakeries in the operations. And we tried to expose them not to be in the boundaries of the 4 walls, but also to connect with what's happening in the market. And I was just talking about all the things that I saw as opportunities. And he said to me, Daniel, how many hours do you sleep every night? and I said, well, recently, not many. because I'm still very energized about the company. How do I get this energy? I think I get it because I get excited about opportunities and really trying to understand what's in the next corner of life. And I'm very enthusiastic and thrilled about how artificial intelligence is going to change the world and how it's going to change our businesses, because it's changing them right now. And either you embrace it with fear or you embrace it with curiosity and then try to move it from there, no?
The energy comes because by being curious, you then get the energy from the answers that your curiosity brings. How do you make sure your people have the same energy you do?
I think you have to bring the right people to the team, and they have to have fun in the things that you're doing. Our business is rather complex because it's a fresh product. We have to execute super well. Otherwise, it's going to be a mess. But I have fun, and I see our teams in the marketing areas or in the sales teams and the operations that they do have a lot of fun. And if you have an environment in which you treat people as you would like to be treated, if they see this as a place where they can have a chance to grow because the company reinvests in your future, if the teams like to engage as they do in outside work, then the energy is there. You don't need to push for energy. Yes, the leader showcases energy and it helps, but I see it all levels of the company, and it's not because of me. It's because of the culture, that the culture really supports the people and the people get engaged in what they're doing. And you don't have to inject any energy on that because it's there.
I love that answer. And it's interesting when you were talking about the reaction of some of the entrepreneurs to the growing bureaucracy. One of the tests I think is so important for functional people at the center is, where do you get your energy? Do you get your energy from your power, or do you get your energy by serving the Marias of the world and seeing her win? And that single question, when you get bureaucrats that get their energy from their own power, you're doomed as a company. When you get functional people that care about serving the Marias of the world, you can grow forever.
Yeah. And I think that personally, I push people to do more and challenge them, but I allow them to have fun and to poke on me and then to do their own things. They're the ones who are going to have basically all the trophies from whatever they do, no? And us, we're there for serving the company.
Simple question that's bloody hard to answer. Where does the energy come from? And here, I think Daniel's kind of like a fish being asked to describe water. His entire organization is built on energy. And it's hard for him to explain where it comes from. Like a fish in water, it's just there. But it's so clear that energy comes first from whom he recruits. He wants a field mentality. You have to get your energy from a loaf of bread baked and delivered well to a hungry consumer. You have to get energy from a Maria welcoming her truth, not fighting it. And it's clear that energy comes from the culture he's maintained from the founders, that he's nurtured and strengthened with acquisitions. It's a culture that celebrates the front line, treating people as they want to be treated, investing in their future. And I know it also comes from ridding the organizations of things that destroy energy. A bureaucrat who finds more joy in their big office than the small things that delight customers. A leader more comfortable in a boardroom than in a bakery. And that's the real insight from this conversation. Culture is what we do. It's how we show up every day. It's our curiosity. It's our humility. It's not what we write on walls. It's what we learn from the bakeries. The right culture energizes, and energized people make sure we deliver everything our customers need. And it starts from the top. Well, as long as the top stays in the field. Everything from today's episode and every episode is at bain.com/founders-mentality. And we'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, stay curious. Next time on Founders Mentality, the CEO Sessions.
There's probably only about 5 people at Khan Academy even had access to it at that point. I knew this was going to change everything. This was going to change society. I'm not sure if ever again in my life am I going to get a preview like that where, it wasn't clear if the president of the United States knew that this was going to come.